Welcome to another mega exciting Kingscrusher radio show. So around 9:10. Okay, so this week we're going to be looking at the Grand Chess Tour in Paris, which had two major elements to it: a rapid play and a blitz play. And checking the games, actually, I think to start off with, I think this week let's check out actually the blitz games. I think they're a lot of fun, and some of them are short and sweet compared to the rapid. So the blitz part of the tournament, just to give you information about this, was after the first leg. The first leg was from June 9th to 12th, so which was a two-day rapid round robin, and then it's a 2-day blitz double round robin. In the combined standings, the results of the rapid games counted double, so 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a loss, whilst the blitz games counted normally. In the case of a tie for first place, a tie break would decide the winner. So at this point we're going to look at the blitz, but at this point in the rapid it was fiercely contested between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen in the rapid section of the tournament, where they both close to each other. Actually, Nakamura was edged half a point ahead, 7 out of 9, and Magnus had 6.5 out of 9. So coming into the blitz, their encounter was eagerly awaited, and I think let's have a look at the encounter between the two giants of the tournament. Start off with, okay, I'm going to add a bit to here and make sure we can get to live book. So Magnus Carlsen playing white, so this is for, I believe, 5 minutes each, 2 seconds increments. So e4 from Magnus, e5, we go into a Roy Lopez, bishop e5. Now we go into the Berlin defense, knight f6, none of this a6, so Berlin. Now, a very popular move nowadays, this d3, cutting down a lot of the theory, and it's a playable position. Bishop c5. Magnus is not even waiting for a prompt to take on c6. He damages black's pawn structure but gives up the bishop pair. And you might think this is slightly strange. A priority here perhaps is to stop this pin, because black's already got a bit more influence over d4 in this position. With that d file opens, bishop g4 might be a nuisance, as well as g4 generally for usage. So h3, you've got to be careful with a move like h3 that doesn't backfire later, but here, okay, doesn't seem that unsafe. We have now black castles, knight c3, rook e8. And now there are some games with white castling, but bishop e3 was played here, and bishop takes e3, f takes. It's one of those cases, the double pawns here in the center doesn't look too bad. They control key squares, they don't look too bad at all. Also, this f file is interesting. You'd think that white has a plan maybe later to put a knight on f5, and even maybe g4 and try and put pressure on f7. So it seems more dynamic for white than for black here. Well, obviously, because white has suffered the structural damage, so has to get something for that. So knight d7, white castles, knight f8. Now queen e1, this is a nifty move. It's very, very effective in this sort of move is very effective in blitz games especially. It's just going direct to the attack, but there's dual points of attack as well. This e5 is slightly more vulnerable than usual. This is another point about doubling the pawns, that this pawn is a little bit more isolated than usual. It can't be supported with d pawn. It's supported here in advance with f6, but this weakening or echoes some weaknesses on the light squares here. And you might think this is a very counterintuitive move, the move coming here. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think white should play here? So white play? What would you play here? What do you think Magnus played here? I hope some of you haven't seen all these games. I myself have not actually until checking them out earlier. So it's an interesting move that's played here. What would you play in this position? If you're on Play Chess, by the way, please can you move away from the notation view or the score sheet view? Can you just go on to the training tab if you're on Play Chess to avoid looking at moves in advance? So there's an interesting okay, for these guest moves, please use training tab to avoid seeing moves in, I'm going to type this, seeing moves in advance. Okay, the move actually was, it looks weakening in some respects. It looks as though this should clearly have downsides. No, it's weakening some squares around the king. Well, black hasn't got a dark square bishop, and this e3 pawn is guarding some key dark squares, so I know it's not easily going to try and use f4 in a hurry. So it seems almost justified by this exact position that white's control of the dark squares isn't that bad here. And of course it has got aggressive intentions that maybe to try and break down either the pawn chain later with the natural undermining in general, put pressure on e5, or just break down the g file. So it's a very useful dual purpose move with the added bonus the king is on g8. So really we're looking at undermining the pawn chain here potentially with g5. So g4, interesting move. You might not think much of it, but it looks pretty dangerous to me. It looks as though it's a move which is imbued with quite easy follow-ups. If you know what the intention behind it is, it looks like it's interesting. So knight g6, queen g3, putting pressure on e5, and also of course g5 is on the cards at some point. Maybe when black cannot react so easily with maybe f5. But here in fact black is concerned about g5. That is actually a threat here and now. If black didn't do something about g5, this could be a problem. Black actually played h6. Now let's just test this assumption. Is actually g5 that dangerous? Okay, I'm going to play a seemingly, well, perhaps we don't want to block. Let's just try and play a move which doesn't block protection of g5. Here, g5. Say f5. We can take here, take, and Engines has this as nice for white after h4 actually. And now there's a threat of h5 and hitting the e5, winning the e5 pawn. If black reacts with, say, well, what does black do? e4? Then there's knight d4 and we're hitting the bishop. That's tricky. Just h4 here would seem to be tricky. Because if this, I think this is going to end up losing a piece, because takes, we can play e4 and just win a piece. So no, that is actually it does seem to be a concern here, white playing g5, and so it does seem as though black needs to do something about this, but what exactly? Yeah, it's probably one of the better defensive moves in the position, to stop, just simply stop g5. But we have, as I say, this is an easy to play. It's now an easy to play position. White is just doubling up rooks. It's very simple. This is what is very good in blitz chess. If you can just build up things without spending too much time on the clock, you're like improving the position. So he's doubling the rooks there. Bishop e6, and now another move imbued with plans basically to try and get a grip on these light squares. The knight can swing in to either f5 or g6 maybe later. So this looks as though white's getting more authority now on the light squares. Queen d7. For the moment, h5, it isn't played here. There is a move. Well, there's knight f8 and a 1. So it's still alright for white, but actually rook g2 was played, which gives the impression g5 is again on the cards here, just a breakthrough to the black king. And of course always it's hitting the pawn chain at the base here, so this e5 could be weaker anytime black plays fg. So again, it's like easy to play chess from white at the moment. Rook f8. And now white advances in the centre, putting great pressure on e5. You might think, well, why didn't he play g5 here? Let's have a quick look. hg. If hg. Well, there's bishop h3 here. That is an important technical detail, actually. This is great for black to win the exchange there. If g takes, there's rook takes, protecting g6. So this works to win the exchange quite well, it seems. I should always say it seems, even with endurance, because chess is so complex. It's better to not be too committal when you evaluate positions. But yeah, it seems g5 is out of the question because of bishop h3. So we have d4 instead. Okay, so pressure in the centre. E takes d4, e takes d4, undoubling the pawns. Rook a e8, and now this grip on the light squares. This knight's going to an awkward square, but it can come out, of course, with a vengeance potentially. Rook d1, but this now implies, well, that there might be d5 in the future, but also, you know, knight h4 coming into f5 looks very logical to try and get this pawn away and put more pressure on the g file. We have queen d6. And Magnus is okay with the exchange of queens here. He plays queen takes d6 actually. You might think this is surprising. If he tries to maintain the queens, and black could cause some trouble here with queen b4, it seems. I know this looks computer-like and a nuisance, but if there's no easy way to break through to the black king, this is now awkward. Queen b4. I mean, like queen b4. You don't want to like do this because, yeah, black's just getting back in the game here with things like knight g5. Black will be very comfortable. So the queens were taken off, and I know it undoubles the black pawns, but this is the thing. This is another very, very complex thing about chess. It seems that sometimes you do want to undouble the opponent's pawns just to be able to create weaknesses that are slightly more exploitable. So I mean, a weakness is only a weakness if it's actually if in reality you can try and exploit it. And here it echoes the f5 square with minimal hassle from black, minimal counterplay with the queen b4 stuff. Just get into f5 immediately. Knight h4. So he's going to come into f5. So it's the two knights versus the bishop and knight, but the bishop is not so helpful here with this constraints around black's dark square pawns coming up. Now, also knight f5 doesn't even have to be played immediately. Black played actually d5 here, and we have e takes, bishop takes, and white just snaps that off, and then he's got that juicy f5 square available. But again, it doesn't go straight in there. If he goes straight in there, I mean, it is good. But first he secures a bit more the e file. And note, if black plays knight f7, then bang, we just play knight g6, winning the exchange. So by not committing this knight's still silly. It's like an awkward place, h8, for that knight. So black now plays rook e4. And now finally knight f5 is played. We have knight f7. And now rook e1, trying to just get rid of this rook and maybe create this passed pawn. That could be dangerous, or just build up on e4. We have this check, king g1. Now knight g5. White is threatening here. Knight e7 check, followed by knight g6, which would fork both rooks. So this looks like a major idea. And knight g5 is actually one of the key moves to try and defend this, believe it or not. If we have a look at this knight e7 now, it wasn't played, rook e7 was played, hitting g7. But knight e7 check here, this position here, we have knight f3 check. That's the point. We have knight f3 check, winning that rook on e1. And if here, we can take that, and if here black's laughing in this position. Yeah, this is horrible for white because the rook and knight are attacked. So this position is just falling to bits for white because all his pawns are going. So that's to be completely avoided. So after this knight g5, yeah, knight f3 is threatens. The rook, pardon me, the rook gets out of the way as well. It's getting out of the way of this fork, and it's going on to the attack for g7. It seems extremely logical then. Rook e7. Okay, now some snags here for black. Well, now, I think rook f7 is technically possible, and it is played. Knight f3 check doesn't do too much. We don't want to lose g7. So rook f7, it seems the most solid logical defense of g7. We have check. Here, though, this is the point on move 32, which some have argued. Well, this is the blunder point, the major blunder area of the game is at move 32 here. The point about this position now is that knight e7 to g6 would be forking the rook on f4 and threatening mate. So this is actually, it needs to be parried from this angle now. And one way it seems to do this, one way black can actually handle that is for example to play rook e4 to just challenge that immediately, that rook on e8. But white would still be better. For example, rook takes here, white's a little bit better because that knight's pretty strong there. White might be undermining this knight soon with c4 as well, so it's difficult for black if he has to play like this. I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's not totally lost or anything just yet. But in the game, we have this move which seems to not pay attention to this knight e7 g6 business. Knight e4 is actually played, and this is instantly +6, you know, nearly +7 this position. And probably the idea might have been an exchange sack or something. Let's just have a look. Knight e7 wasn't actually played here. No. Okay, pardon me. There is knight d6 in this position. It's not as easy as that. It seems there's another route here to do the same, to do much more damage than knight e7 to g6. Yeah, I mean, if black doesn't play knight d6, he's had it, but knight d6 here is very good. It would force basically this move, which is losing a lot of the advantage. But the way it's actually played here is absolutely amazing. In fact, then it's not what looks to be that original plan, but in fact, knight h4, and this has got a huge difference to it, that the knight, this is an important subtlety actually, the difference between the knight coming in to g6 is all important. On e7 as the source square, it's a loose piece on e7. On h4 it's not a loose piece, and so this knight d6 is not forcing rook h8. We're not losing the knight on e7, and in fact there's the bone crushing move now, just rook d8, so we're hitting the knight and we're still getting in this knight g6 for rook h8. It's over. It's over. This little subtlety of where the knight jumps in to that key attacking square was probably overlooked by Nakamura. I mean, it's easy to do. I mean, even I was just thinking that the routine knight e7 to g6, it was the way to get to g6, not the sort of counterintuitive, you know, knight on the rim is dim. But the knight on the rim is dim. The thing is, the knight is safer on h4 than e7. So this is working so much better. Black has no defense here to knight g6. You know, if he does this, there's en passant, we just win that rook. Do you see that there's no defense here? Yeah? Did you all agree? No defense here, yeah? God, what have I done? Windows feedback. No, there's no defense here. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think there's a bias as well. To be honest, there's a bias of pieces moving through the center. You know, we regard the center in such high regard, but again, you know, it's these any rules about the center or not the center. You need to balance also about loose pieces. You know, this one is just a loose piece essentially on e7. Yeah, one more move, it's devastating to get the g6, but because it's a loose piece, knight d6 just holds. It just holds the position for black. There is also a knight g6. I mean, it's just not much for white though. This position, he's just basically getting rid of a pair of rooks. But this way is just so much more crushing. Just to play, it's a killer move. Knight h4 in this position is an absolute killer move. So I think there is a lesson from this Blitz game that you know, where do we put, you know, how do we route our attacking pieces to the opponent's king? I think that's a fascinating point about this. Do you? I hope so. Anyway, so we'll go on to another game. So let's do some nutshell points on this game. Well, white accepted the double pawns in the center, and it seems that white gave something this extra control of the dark squares. So when he played g4, you know, the usual downsides of the dark squares, particularly f4, that, you know, that will be usually, you know, losing games because your f4 wins. But the double pawns in the center covered, especially important to cover the f4 square. So this g4 business was very, very good for getting a grip on the light squares, and the coup de grace was actually played on the light squares as well. So the logic is beautiful if you look at the logic of the game. I know it's only a Blitz game, but what white did was very, very positive, and he used, you know, amazingly the double pawns to seemingly weaken his dark squares, but they weren't exploitable. So he actually got a great light square based attack. Okay, let's go on to another game. Okay. Hold on a sec. Alright, let's have a look at Kramnik against Nakamura. I'm deliberately going to pick shortish games from the Blitz because it's actually sweltering hot today. I don't know, it's pretty hot here in the UK. I don't want to pick such long games. It's a bit of a bias today. So Nakamura was playing black against Kramnik. Kramnik plays knight f3. We have knight f6, g3. So Catalan territory, pretty popular nowadays. The Catalan. c4. I mean, c4 is the main move. It's not really to play like king's engine attack with d3. I think this is just thought to be equal, this sort of thing. So c4 is challenging, you know, black's center, fighting that center, and now gripping dark squares. So in some ways, it's more aggressive than a d3 king's engine attack style. But this pawn is now taken. This is actually the most popular move, knight e5. And again, this is the most popular way of playing the position, knight c6. And quite often players, they choose here almost equally either knight takes or bishop takes. But Kramnik has definitely played this line. I'm pretty sure I've seen this a few times with bishop takes c6. And you might think this is counterintuitive, but we've seen this many times before from Kramnik, giving up the fianchettoed bishop because he knows that this forcing sequence ends up essentially in wrecking black's structure, even though it seems as though he might have weakened himself on this light square diagonal. But here, queen a4. And let's just take stock of pawns here. 4, 5, 6, 7. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But yeah, black's actually going a pawn down here pretty soon after e5. D takes, queen takes c4. And just as a sanity check, how did black go a pawn down? Because black seemed to be the one losing, winning the pawn on c4. But black gave up a pawn here actually. This was the point where black gave up a pawn with knight c6. Although, and if we take this other way, you might think theoretically, what's going on here? Well, this is thought to be about equal disposition. Okay, so black had actually given up a pawn here, and it's white. In white, winning this pawn is actually going to be a pawn up. So white's actually technically a pawn up, but it looks as though black, and this looks just quite strange, but a well worked out maneuver, which I'm pretty sure has been played several times before, because it looks as though this is almost outrageous that everything's not really connected at the moment, plus light square weaknesses, plus lack in development. Look at all of black's pieces. Black's a pawn down, but hasn't black got great pressure, piece play, compensation? But there's a well worked out maneuver here, queen d3, which seems to offer even more target practice for the black pieces. Rook a d8, but this has been played before quite a lot. There's about at least 48 games in live book from this position. So black, a pawn down with tons of pressure, queen h5 threatens immediately to exterminate white with knight g4 because of the threat of mate and hitting the queen. But this has been worked out. f3, this has been worked out and played before. f3, we have bishop c4 now, and now the threat again is to almost exterminate white with rook e8 and taking here. That will be kind of end of game. But knight c3 protecting e2 just in time, rook fe8, and the queen doesn't have to immediately, it seemed, go to f2, although that's a popular move in this position, and it's the engine's preference to just stick the queen on f2. In fact, that is the engine's preference, and then to play rook e1 and then maybe one day e4. But here a slightly rarer move is played, g4. I'm not sure what to say about this move. If Kramnik's played it, you'd think it's a good move, but it is Blitz, so maybe Kramnik is not too serious about this move, because I mean, if you look at black's position, black has really aggressive pieces. Would you really want to play, I mean, be honest, would you really want to play this with white a pawn up? I mean, would you prefer white or black in this, prefer white or black in Blitz here? I mean, seriously, if I asked you that question, I would hope that some of you that have played Blitz would say instantly, you know, black, because black's got all the piece pressure. Although black's a pawn down, look at white's position, and he's creating more weaknesses around his king, surely. In fact, even the engine evaluation after g4 is not that happy with white's position. It's giving this as equal after queen g6, because I mean, there's things now. Well, the queen's got to go back, so it steps back. It doesn't want to win this pawn, by the way. It steps back to f2. If it does want to win that pawn, there's going to be trouble with knight takes g4. And for example, I think this is murderous here, bang, rook takes e2 threatening mate, knight takes e2, and then we checkmate with bishop d5, end of game. So yeah, there's some dangers here. We have queen f2 not going after this pawn, not yet. We have knight d5 here, knight takes d5, rook takes d5, and black can try and open things up with f5. We have rook e1. Okay, so h5 is played, g5, trying to keep things closed, f6, h4. Now, great coordination here with rook d e5. Perhaps technically better might be this to take here and then here, apparently, with the idea of getting a dangerous pawn here. And if it takes there, then we can take it here. This might be another way of playing it, because if it takes here, this is possible, rook d2, and that's okay for black. But anyway, the way it was played was rook d e5, which does seem to allow e4. And technically, engines actually like this for white now after e4. So it seems as though Nakamura has kind of missed the stronger continuation in getting this position, although it seems as though white's untangling now and connecting rooks. So with bishop f4, just sorry, one moment. So yeah, I think maybe the FG continuation could have been a little bit stronger. So we have here f5. Now bishop f4. This is still good for white now. This is actually quite good for white for the moment, it seems, because white has succeeded in connecting rooks, and now is even making threats, and positionally sacrificing this pawn, which gains time now for this move to be actually playable here, hitting the bishop. The bishop goes back. Possibly a really good move is e5 here. It would keep things kind of safe and locked up and closed. But in the game, we have this might be a slight slip up. e5 would seem to be a fairly solid move in the circumstance, actually. But there seems to be a slip up here in rook takes c7. It seems as though black's getting something he shouldn't have here. The white center is crumbling a bit, and what's happened also here is obviously this diagonal has been compromised more significantly than if e5 had been played. So there's a constant idea of bishop d5 just across these light squares. If instead, yeah, this does seem to be a slip up here with rook takes c7 in terms of basically king safety, because if you imagine after this move e5, how do we get a battery on the diagonal with the bishop and queen? It's a little bit more tricky to achieve that. But here in the game continuation, in this version of events, there's an immediate battery opportunity with bishop d5, and also other threats as well. So queen e5 protecting, well, trying to evict the queen f3, but again battery opportunity with bishop d5 at some point. Bishop g3 now is played, which is a terrible mistake, really allowing this battery opportunity in full force. This is actually the major threat to try and parry in this position, and it could have been parried with queen e3, for example, check, and then here, and this isn't so painful because maybe we can carry on the game. But the way it's being played now, again, it seems on the reckless side, but it is Blitz after all, that this battery is just allowed, and it's pretty terminal battery actually. This is the blunder of the game at move 33 here now. This would seem to be the blunder of the game, which finishes white off in terms of the end of king safety starts here after bishop g3. Yeah, bishop d5 is incredibly powerful here. Now, maybe this was part of a miscalculation involving this check and this seemingly dangerous check here. So we have check, check, but the king just goes to h6 here. And of course, this is not mating because the king can pick up g6. Check, pings up, and then goes to h7. And the queen is also protecting h5. So here is where white is forced to resign. Yeah, white resigns here. He's getting mated. He's getting mated. It's like a forced mate. Yeah, so there's a bit of Kramnik was doing well, but he needed to lock up the position to ensure king safety with e5, it seems. It seems his g4 might not be incredibly losing immediately, but queen f2 instead of g4 looks like that's why it's the more trodden path. It looks less committal than g4. Okay, so what do we get from this game? Well, I think there's a point in particular about blitz chess, how you can be a pawn down, but if you've got a strong piece pressure, and in particular if you can compromise the opponent's king safety, then I think you're doing very well in the Blitz game. Even the Blitz with increments, you're still doing very well. As this game shows, it can be basically fatal. That one slip up can become fatal. Okay, so let's have a look at another game. Not too long. Caruana against Nakamura. Caruana playing white plays e4. We have e5. We're going to Gokyo piano here because black plays bishop c5. I think it's when black plays this, but we call this Gokyo piano. We have Carlsen. f6, d3, d6, c3, a6, a4, black castles. Now quite usual is knight bd2 here. This is, for example, this is very usual, knight bd2, bishop drops back, this sort of thing. The rook can protect f2 and the knight can carry on a maneuver. So that sort of thing is kind of usual, but here we get this pin, which you think with the bishop here, this pin might be more dangerous than usual. It's kicked with h6. We have bishop h4, and now black does dare to play g5, although it seems to be encouraging knight takes g5, but the best is bishop g3. Knight g5 is not in the main live book games. Bishop g3, for example, this has been seen before, this sort of stuff. But we have knight takes g5 here, and so this pin, how fatal is it or not? Well, the first thing Nakamura does is get his king to g7, so that helps protect f6 literally, but it also means rook h8 becomes available. So we have queen f3, and he uses both of those properties now because the king is protecting knight. So rook h8, knight d2, and I actually guessed this move when I was playing through the game earlier. Thankfully I was able to see this move here, which you might think is really cheeky. Black to play here. How do you irritate white's pin? That's my clue. How do you irritate white's pin that he's kind of invested in? Black to play. How can you put a spanner in the works here for white? Do you know? I'll give you 500 points if you can guess the next move. It's funny, especially if you haven't seen the game. Any ideas? Rook a2. Bishop g4. I mean, that loses bishop g4, doesn't it? Hang on, let's have a look at bishop g4. This loses to bishop takes f6, because then we just take on g4 with a check. No, lose 200 points. You lose 200 points with bishop g4. You must see the forcing moves. Rook h5, another one. You lose 200 points as well, Jordan Couch. Look, bishop takes f6, forcing move. Is it the weather? You're not looking at forcing moves. Come on. Or you are looking at forcing moves, but not the opponents. You need to look at the opponents as well. There is a forcing move which doesn't lose a piece, actually. You're on the right ballpark of trying to irritate the pin, but there's another way without losing a piece for the game immediately. You're not finding this move. I think the problem with this move, it's not in your candidate moves. It's a special sort of move you really wouldn't normally even think of playing, and it's not going to be in your candidate move list. And I dread that concept in many ways, the candidate move list. But sometimes it just helps you find specific outrageous resources which you wouldn't normally consider. I've given you the ballpark area. You want to try and irritate this pin. So what if we break down a pin? Let's step away from the game. Let's think about a pin conceptually. Let's just visualize a pin. There's a pinned piece. There's a piece that's pinned. There might be a more valuable piece behind that. It's not an absolute pin, it's a relative pin. How can we irritate the whole pin construction? We can somehow interfere with the pin's piece. How can we do that here? Now, have you seen the game? Have you seen the game? Someone with 4 nicknames. If that's your name, wow. Okay, it's king g6. Yeah, it irritates the pin or causes a concession. Unbelievable move. It's one of the strongest moves in the position. It's the engine move, king g6. It's forcing a major concession here. Clearly white doesn't want to give up this bishop because that's the end of the pin, right? I think we can do this. Whereas bishop takes f7, but safer than that. That's still okay for black, but black doesn't have to even indulge that. Black could go here, and then what? Okay, so it forces a concession as h4, but you'll note now that the previous forcing move, bishop g4, is working a lot better now. This is not with check, is it? There's no check on the king here. So bishop takes f6, and even cleverer now, even cleverer, guess what Nakamura plays here? Well, he has to avoid losing the piece. He plays queen d7. This is ingenious. The king is going to be scooping up the pin, the pinner. The pinner is off the board now. The pinned piece has been wiped off the board successfully, completely ruining that investment that white made, you know, for that horrendous looking pin. So if you ever have a game you play king g6 and win, can you post that game to my YouTube channel? Because you heard it here first, right? That is a fantastic way of ruining white's pin in this particular sort of position, of course. So okay, white probably gutted now, absolutely gutted. The engine's saying he's nearly -2 after that. He plays on, he plays d4. What he's trying to do now is trying to get e4 for his knight. Okay, it's scary. Nakamura takes that and allows e5 check. But the king doesn't have to remain on f6 here. This doesn't have to be played here, because then check is knight takes c5 and it's complicated. No, he doesn't have to do that. He can move his king now away, knight e4, and the other rook's joining the party here. So look at white's king behind that, knight f6. It looks like a big family fork though, but queen f5, bishop d3. The bishop has left c4, so the queen makes use of that e6 square. b4, the bishop drops back. Black's in the driving seat, material up. Knight takes e5. This is huge now. After c4, it's just a disaster. White's best would be to, it seems, grab the exchange. This is miserable though. And here, just white's losing basically. White's just basically losing this position anyway. But he hastens to the end with c4. Knight takes e5. White's just material down for not much. King f8. You might wonder about f4 that is played, but this move king f8 also means the rook is not a loose piece, so that affords now bishop h5 hitting the queen. This is desperate for white. If he moves his queen here, there's things like knight, well, there's knight takes d3 in this particular position. Where does the queen go? Where does it go? There. Then there's knight f3 check, and we're winning this rook on e1. It's a disaster. Then we're winning this all over. So white is in desperation, plays queen takes g8 check, f takes, d takes. This is desperate stuff. Black is clearly material up here. We have queen f6, check, bishop takes g6. Now there might be a slight danger here if black took with the f pawn. There might be. Let's just check it out. He actually played d3 and that was the end of the game. That opens up that bishop and the pawn's really dangerous as well. But let's just quickly just make sure of this, for example. Even this is okay for black because the queen's actually controlling h8, so that's okay for black. The pawn's still winning here. Okay, this is just technically stronger, just to play the check first. Now if c5, this pawn would just carry on here, forget about taking the bishop, just interfere with the rooks first, and then say check, and then we can take the bishop, and it's just easily winning. So yeah, so that was, I thought that was a neat game. So d3 check, Caruana resigned here. So I'm glad someone's tested this knight sack in a high level Blitz game, because it seems, you know, okay, it's Blitz, you might give that a punt in Blitz, but I hope someone does that against me sometime and I can play king g6, yeah, breaking the pin. So that was fun, I thought. So what do we get from this? I mean, this is Gokyo piano with the sort of, I think a lot of people are going to see this pin on their knight when their bishop's over here. So it was kind of interesting that, you know, you play if you're brave enough to play h6 and g5, you can sustain, apparently in some cases, a knight sack. So sometimes that knight sack is not working. Okay, so let's have a look at another game. Now, I've run out of shortish Nakamura games, but there was a funny incident with Topalov. Now, although that's not so shortish, let's have a quick look at that game, because there's an important thing about rules and stuff. So Nakamura was playing white d4, Topalov played, we had a Nimza Indian defense. This is the Rubinstein variation after Akiba Rubinstein. Now after castles here we have knight g2. This is pretty standard stuff. Knight g3, also popular as g3 here. Bishop d3, c5, d takes c5, and it seems, you know, white wants to play against the isolated queen's pawn. It seems a noble enough idea to try and, you know, lock down the d4 square here, but d4 was played immediately, and it's not so easy. You know, black's immediately trying to dissolve that. But how to fix d4 against d4? It was tricky, because actually if knight a4, apparently bishop g4 is annoying. If bishop takes, and then it's okay for black. Apparently this is okay for black, and black can even contest again d4 and e5 with bishop e5. It's okay for black. So anyway, allowing this dissolving of black's isolated queen's pawn, you might wonder why. But in fact, ed wasn't played. That would be just better for black. e4. But this is not ideal because this pawn is well supported, and black gets this dangerous e5 square. So Topalov here it seems to be in good shape out of this opening. Bishop f4. We have knight fg4. And there's ideas here, there's very aggressive ideas available, like taking here and then maybe even g5 to get the e5 square, for example. Not after h3, but let's show that with rook b1 as an example. Takes, and this is maybe a bit crazy looking, but maybe this is possible, this sort of thing, because we want to push this pawn. This would be a bit better for black. It's aggressive stuff. Anyway, so we have h3 immediately, kicking that knight, trying to. Knight takes, queen takes, knight e5. This isn't so good how black's played this actually. Apparently the move here is to play g5. For example, like this. Might be better than the way it was played. And g5 is a crazy looking move, but maybe in some positions it gives you some influence on the center that you need. So the way it's played here, it's like white's getting a nice center now, rolling pawns as well, f5, but maybe also e5 is better here, just to get the e4 square. f5 might be a slight mistake, in fact, because now bishop d7, we have rook c8. Okay, now it looks from one perspective as though, isn't this a crushing attack? If we get rook g4, knight h5, isn't this a crushing attack? Not so, it seems. Queen g5 is a nuisance, because as soon as this rook moves, then there's queen e3 check, and we're extending this pawn, extending that bishop. That's exactly what happens. It seems this puts a spanner in the works for white's attacking intentions. So rook g4, queen e3 check. Okay, still a bit of an attack it seems, but now bishop b5. Against white's attack here, black's pawn is potentially being unblockaded. We have rook takes g7 here, rook takes f7. And it looks as though this is a really crushing threat, but yeah, bishop takes e2 was played. Which actually does technically lead white to advantage, apparently. Hang on a sec. Okay, white's doing well, in fact. Okay, white's doing well. Because knight f6 threatens mate. So black plays, basically is forced to play rook c7 to defend against rook takes h7 mate, but he ends up losing the rook on e8 as well. So it's the exchange up for the moment for white. Bishop g3, and he plays e5. This looks like really dangerous stuff. Bishop b5. Something went wrong though soon. Knight d6 hits that bishop. Bishop goes to d3. I think it was around here that knight takes b7 was played. Although white's the exchange up, he has to tread very carefully. It seems the move might be f6 in this position, not what was played. So white was doing fantastically well here. On f6, the point is on f6 that if e2 trying to win like this rook, white gets these two gigantic connected passed pawns supported by the knight, which just win. So for example here, these just win. f7 or even e7. f7 might be stronger. If here we play e7 and it's supported by the knight, they're just absolutely winning here. So this would have been, it seems this is the way to play it, to play f6. Basically, I mean, it seems just to get the two connected passed pawns. If bishop takes, then there's knight f7 check, winning that bishop, and that's the end of that. So it seems that was the winning move here, f6, but it's Blitz, knight takes b7. This puts a lot of the advantages evaporated quite significantly after knight takes b7, because this pawn now goes to e2, and after e6 we have bishop takes f5, and it's getting a bit tricky. Bishop g6. So black's getting this rook. It's got a bit more complicated. Okay, the king is coming over to that pawn, and all of a sudden here, around here, black's actually now evaluated as much better. Black's much better here. We have bishop c2, which threatens bishop d1. That's interesting to try and queen. Knight c5. King takes. If bishop d1, then there's knight d3, stopping that. That was the idea there. Okay, that was clever. But king takes e7, b6. It's actually really good for black, this position, all of a sudden, up to king d6. It seems this pawn might not be going anywhere. In fact, that hits the knight, and also this bishop's on b8, so b7, what we do here is just take this, winning. So white played rook c1, and technically this is really good for black. But what happened here, right, was e1, and you see that auto promotion, which is a luxury of online. You see that auto promotion is because I've got auto promotion on, and somewhere. Okay, now imagine I didn't have auto promotion on, right? So imagine e1's played, but we leave the pawn. Look, we can see that pawn there. You see that? And that's like playing an illegal move, because if you don't grab a queen and you promote a pawn to a queen, you can't do that. Well, not in professional blitz. You can in casual blitz, and you have all these pawns like acting as queens. Or what you can do is an upside down rook. That was an old one, yeah. But here, Topalov, believe it or not, he forgot about that, and he didn't put a queen on the board. No, sorry, it's not funny. He didn't put a queen on the board, so forfeited the game from this position. It's not funny. It's not funny. I'm sorry, but it's just what happened. It's just what happened. You would think Topalov has played Blitz before. No? Can you believe this happened? He didn't put the queen on the board. You know, aren't the pros given an extra queen sometimes at the start of the game? Do you remember? They're given, you know, that stuff about giving the extra queen at the start of the game to handle pawn promotions? Do you remember? But yeah, he just left his pawn as a queen and forfeited the game. Oh, let's have a look. Was he really winning? Okay, imagine if he did put a queen on without forfeiting. This is actually technically good for black, although black's only got one pawn left. This position, we can trap the king for a start. I don't think this king's going anywhere, because it's still a bit of play in a blitz. It's not like certain death, but it's you know, someone could lose on time. It's not certain. Anything, not really certain. But anyway, that's what happened. He didn't put a queen on the board, and he lost there and then. And you got to remember that. I think that is that even a rule in club chess. This stuff has filtered down even to club chess. You got to respect these rules about promoting. I think it is a rule. Actually, no. Someone did claim. We had. I'm pretty sure someone claimed a few months back in Blitz, and it happens in Blitz tournaments as well. You can't do that. Do any of you, come on, own up? Do any of you do that in your Blitz? You got to stop doing that. Yeah, if you put a pawn on the 8th, you've got to go and get a queen. Yeah, do you know that? Does everyone know that? Otherwise, it's kind of like an illegal move that you've just played. So anyway, no one's owning up here. Sorry, I'll give you 20 seconds to own up. To own up. Come on. Some of you are not getting queens, are you? Yeah. Come on, just admit it. Admit it. You must have played Blitz in real life. Admit it. Okay. No one's admitting it on stream. I'm sure some of you have done that. Okay, let's go on to another game. So we have a look at some Carlsen Blitz games, because these others are just too long. Okay. So I think Carlsen had a few shortish games. Yeah. Oh, Wesley So. Ah, yeah, no, he had a couple of shorty ones. So against Wesley So, let's have a look at this in the Blitz. So Wesley So C4, and we have an English opening. Right, 3 knight C6, G3. So Magnus Carlsen's playing black here. So D5. It's all pretty standard stuff so far. So far, so good. A3, Rook E8. Now on live book, I think B4 is pretty popular. It's the main move here. This is the main move in response. This is the main move in response. Now quite often A5 is played here. For example, this continuation. Has seen a few games. Okay, but okay, A5 wasn't played here. We see Bishop G4, and quite often here H3 is played. For example, like this. Okay, but in this game we see more special move, Knight D2, Queen C8, and that looks pretty direct, Queen C8 to me. In that it might be up to some mischief to play Bishop H3, but there might be something more subtle about it as well. We have Rook E1, A5, B5, Knight D4. Now I think black is interested in playing A4 because it kind of disconnects this pawn. It gets that B3 square potentially. It could be useful to play A4. In fact, after Knight B3 does play A4. Now this, you'd think this pawn structure usually is what black's aiming for, because what he's doing is tying down white to his E pawn, and black's on full blast to that potentially backward E pawn. We have Queen D7. So black seems to have achieved most of his strategic goals of the position. So Queen C2, Rook AD8. But hang on a sec. Technically better here, it seems Rook A5. Rook A5. If Knight C5. Not this because of that, but actually here holding that. And this is dropping. So that's apparently the technically best move, but Magnus played this, and it should have been fine for white with Knight C5. Should have been fine. Bishop takes, because white is getting that bishop pair. Yes, he's losing E2 for the moment, but he's picking up. Well, he picks up B7 in this position, and that might not have been the best actually. It might be better to play Bishop E4. It seems Bishop E4. What is this about? If Queen D6, take here, and just maybe come round for this pawn slowly. This one. There's back row issues as well. I don't know. It seems this bishop this is intriguing. Sorry, this is intriguing to me anyway. Bishop E4 seems a lot stronger apparently than Bishop takes B7. But anyway, let's not dwell on that. Bishop takes B7. It's still okay for white apparently, because here Bishop takes D3, Rook D1. White's getting this D pawn. Queen takes. Queen takes C7. and he gets the d pawn, it should be okay for white. It should be fine for white. White's got an advantage here, it seems, technically. Black played knight c4. So Magnus played knight c4. And what on earth is going on? Okay, white plays bishop f3. I think I'm losing the plot on this game actually. There's too many pieces just hanging here. Hold on a sec, hold on a sec, hold on. Okay, we've got this position, and why does black play knight c4? Just as a sanity check, what's going on? Rook takes here, there's check, okay, winning the rook. So that is a poisoned bishop here. That cannot be taken. I think we can all agree that this bishop is poisoned. This position is definitely good for black. So we have this tricky knight c4, and white's response is, Wesley plays bishop f3. So he really is, he's not he is threatening rook takes now with the idea of rook d1 check. That is the threat, rook takes d3 now. Okay, so we have now in this position the move queen b3 is played, and now okay, the bishop's protecting the rook. We have bishop c5 attacking this rook, and it's still, even at this point, it seems as though white's technically fine, but rook e8 does look as though there's some interesting forcing moves available to black, and it's here we have an almighty blunder in this position. Yeah, Wesley absolutely blunders his entire position on move 28 here. He was doing quite well there. Okay, you might think a move like this to get the back row sorted. This, I'm not even sure this is any good actually, because of bishop e4, because then we're on the rook here and we're on the bishop, so you can rule out king g2. But white even plays an even worse move than king g2. Maybe it is kind of tricky, because I think what's tricky about this is that white is suffering not just the back row but some light square weaknesses here and some piece liabilities. He played actually queen d7, which loses immediately. Crikey. I thought I understood this tactic earlier. Now I'm not so sure. No, is it still? Oh my god. Yeah, this just loses. It's a horrible forcing sequence. If you can guess this combination, then you get 500 points. Black to play a crushing combination. Can you see what black plays here? This is okay. It's quite nice. I'm going to peek at the full view on this over here. Okay, I think I get it now. I wasn't actually getting it earlier. Okay, it goes like this. Bang, bang, bang. And if king g1, there's bishop h3 checkmate. And the other problem is if king f3, then there's knight e5 check, believe it or not. So black ends up being a rook up. Yeah. Okay, so the point he blundered is not such an easy position as I mentioned, because in this position these are potentially loose or target pieces. Now king g2, there's bishop e4. What does white do here? That's losing as well. Basically, its best might be like taking bishop c6. This is just the exchange up for black. So that was a tricky position. But yeah, queen d7 just unfortunately. I mean, does that happen with queen? What if we played queen c6? It's still the same sort of thing. It's still a fork there. We still get a fork on c6, of course. So what does white actually do? Well, the engine move for white is to block this bleeding rook from e1 with bishop e7. That's the engine suggestion. And then maybe white can afford king g2. You know, say this, can white play this to get into safety? Or no, he'd want to play queen d7 here, which would be winning actually. Nearly. Oh, it's like hitting, yeah. So black would be on the back foot here against queen d7. Might be 2, rook c1. Yeah, you see white was better, but I don't know, you can't trust these forcing moves that are available to your opponent, even theoretically, because there's going to be some horrible way that this theoretical forcing move is going to be working, and it's the case here. It's just it's the end. It's, yeah, queen takes d1, bang, it just wins. Queen takes d1. All agreed? I thought that was a good one actually, but I didn't understand it fully earlier. Actually, I didn't understand. To be honest, I only quickly played for it. But yeah, it's a pretty good combination. Someone was saying on YouTube to me recently, the tactical moves don't require any commentary. But I haven't replied to that yet. But you know, tactics are like responsible for winning most of the games. So if you like pay attention only on positional play, you'll just end up losing tactically, I think, most of the time. I mean, you've always got to be interested in tactics. It pushes what seems to be a theoretical risk to make it a real reality, harsh reality of losing material here. That rook e1 check possibility to nudge the king out of its castle. We're nudging the king out of its castle, and once it's there, it's like I'm thinking of this like Mr. Bean is out and about. It's just recipe for disaster. Once you've got the king out and about, you're winning material quite often. That happens a lot in Blitz. If the opponent's king, as soon as the opponent's king is out and about, you can often win material. I've been finding that recently myself. Or losing material. If your king's out and about, you'll find yourself losing material to horrible checks. It makes sense. So should we have a look at another game? Okay, so that was a shortish game, but there was also, okay, this one, Carlsen against Fresnay, who once played an absolutely brilliant game, I think, against Kramnik. This sort of brilliancy game against Kramnik. So Fresnay, one of the leading French GMs, has played some brilliant games in his time. So Magnus was playing white against him. And the French defense player, guess what the French defense player played? The French defense player played the French... Sorry, guess what the French player played? He played the French defense. Ha ha. He doesn't have to, does he? Just because he's a French player. It's a bit of a passive opening, isn't it? French defense. I don't know, it's a good opening. Yeah. I used to play it a lot. But there was one season I just lost virtually every game with it, and I tried to give it up after that. So anyway, this is a French defense game, just at Blitz. d4, d5. Knight c3, knight f6. We have now this variation, which Magnus uses, is something you might be outside of your pet lines, because quite often f4 is played here, and this is a move I'm often playing. Blitz is actually one of the most popular moves is to play f4, because it seems so logical just to reinforce the center here. But there's also knight f3 that's been played before, and knight ce2. This has got some venom, because it means that white can play, if white got time, he'd play like this, and maybe even like this, and then knight f4, and we hit this hard this pawn chain. We'd have this sort of position with a knight on f4, and we'd try and play it like a kind of King's Engine defense or something in reverse. It's just the sort of stuff to destroy the pawn chain. So knight ce2, I have had some bad games against this. That's why I'm mentioning this. There's quite some venom, this move, knight ce2. It's I think it's like Steinitz line. So c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3. But here it does block in this bishop, which means b5 is possible, and it is played. Black can expand on the queen side. a3, a5, knight f4. Okay, I know it's without the f pawn, it's more solid this way it's being played. I don't think it was actually practical to do what I just mentioned, by the way. If we play f4, I think that's just asking for trouble. It's not actually, oh, it's the main move. It's the main move. This is possible. It is possible to play it like this. It looks like, okay, some sort of advanced variation theory. So knight f3 is actually a bit of the second most popular way of playing this. So not so pawn chain oriented, okay, or defending the center, but okay, b5, a3, a5, knight f4, hitting b5, that's protected, h4, h6, bishop d3, and there might be an idea to sometimes take on e6 for bishop g6. Might be sometimes queen b6, bishop e3, bishop e7, knight castled, c takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes, bishop c5. But white's doing well here after b4. It seems he's locking down the dark squares. Bishop takes, c takes. Now here it seems I wouldn't take this pawn because it seems as though white would have a tactic here. Can you guess? I've kind of alluded to it already. White to play and win here. This wasn't played, but if it was played, white has what? White to play here. Can you see what white can play in this position? What is a crushing move in this position? I'll give you a clue, a tip. The queen is potentially a loose piece, right? No, not bishop takes b5. Bishop takes b5. We can just take this knight off. That's winning for black. No, knight takes e6. Remember this check I mentioned? So if takes, we win the queen with the check. And if queen takes, then we have rook e1. If the queen moves, check. That's pretty devastating. Yeah, take the rook. Okay, so it's pretty devastating. No, you can't take that pawn. So a takes is played. A takes. And now black plays g5. This looks crazy, g5. Engine suggesting to play this, but even so white's better after knight h5 with ideas of queen g4. Pretty direct. f5. This is better for white. But in the game, this g5 immediately looks absolutely mental. It weakens a lot of key squares, but okay, so knight h5, and now black does take on d4, so he's really asking for it somehow, surely. Now knight f6 check. So if knight takes, then we can win the queen with bishop takes b5 check. In fact, we'd probably win the rook first, technically better, and then take the queen. So nope, can't take on f6, so he plays king e7. But we're back to the same old story again. We're actually back to the story that we've been trying to depict here about these tactical disasters. Because what does Magnus play in this position? White's play just winning material. This actually happens in the game. This is not a sideline anymore. It is Blitz after all. In longer games these things would be in sidelines, but this is a Blitz game and this disaster actually happens here. So on move 21, it's a simple move actually. Can you see what White plays? So it's on the same sort of theme of winning the queen, that's the clue. it's the same theme. Yeah, we haven't gone away from this theme. Just knight takes d7. He's just won a piece, hasn't he? Yeah, because if it takes, then we play bishop takes again. Check. Winning the queen. I think. Yeah, we do win the queen. Doesn't matter about a1 or f1. Doesn't matter about that. Yeah. Oh dear. So queen takes b4. Piece down. Knight b6. And this rook's defending a6. It goes to a7. Now queen f3, and that juicy f6 square is wonderful, of course. Black resigned here. If he plays a move like queen f4, then, well, one of the more crushing moves apparently is taking here. So just get this position. This is crushing, because we've got things like queen d6, queen c5. I think there's no defense here. Or we can just win this one. Like bishop up for white. So anyway, yeah, this is hopeless. I mean, if king here, queen f6, this position, there's rook takes, and rook c1 is pretty terminal. And the knight's controlling a8. Yeah, once the queen gets into f6, that's the end of the game. So anyway, he's material off in any case. So black resigned there. Okay, so Fresnay was dispatched quite quickly in 23 moves. That's one of the shortest games of the Blitz tournament, I think. One of the shorter ones. Okay, now Carlsen against Giri. Okay, if we want to do a nutshell summary of this particular game, well, it seems this knight c2 is a good weapon of choice instead of f4. Even though black gets in b5, what we saw in this game was that it was quite dangerous in any case. Yeah, it seems as though black didn't want to castle kingside. He's a bit too scared and just cracked up instead, losing pieces. Okay, let's go on to the Giri game. So, against Giri, e4 for Magnus. Giri plays Sicilian defense, except we go into this line, bishop c4. So Magnus avoided the Kopek system. Yeah, Kopek system. Rest in peace, Danny Kopek. Anyway, so Magnus played bishop c4. We have bishop c4 is pretty rare. I think the Kopek system is rarer actually. Yeah, 16 games for Kopek. This is it's been played 1600 times. Bishop c4. Okay. Now knight f6. d3, g6. So this is another way of, oh, this looks sharp already. e5, d takes, knight takes, black defends, f7, queen f3. We have bishop b5 now. bishop takes d7. I'm wondering if I actually played through this game earlier. It doesn't ring a bell. It doesn't ring any bells. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Have I gone through this game? Really? I'm not sure I did. Hang on. Pardon me. I don't think I've been through this game, but let's just play through it. Let's see quickly. I don't remember anything about this game. No, forget this game. Forget it. Sorry, I didn't check it out earlier. It looks as though there's some horrible blunder here that happened. I think it was okay, wasn't it? No, he was getting crushed. He was getting crushed here after king h7 in particular. But this position is pretty bad anyway. But I haven't actually I haven't got any thoughts to give you about this game because I haven't actually played through it ever before, so that doesn't help. I thought I did, but I didn't. Okay. I think there were some other games I have actually played through. Carlsen against Aronian. I would have some comments on this. Okay, so e4, e5, Aronian playing black. We go into this is the Berlin defense. So Aronian's an expert in this, and we have d3, Mance's pet d3 lines with the early bishop takes c6. So he's making this sort of system quite popular nowadays. Bishop e6 is a bit rare. Knight d7 is usually played. Okay, so knight c3. Now we have knight a4. Both sides castle. b3, and again this echoes that e5 is the target here. That pawn's a bit more isolated than usual, so we have h6, bishop b2 hitting e5. Now Magnus actually took that bishop on b6 and pushed through with putting pressure on e5 again. E takes, knight takes. And okay, white is getting what seems to be a quite dangerous bishop across this diagonal. If his queen can help out at some point, that would be nice. We have c5, knight d5 hitting c7. It's too dangerous, I think, to take here. If queen takes, this is too dangerous because of c7. Well, this is too passive rather. This position is just not nice. Black's a bit stuck there. He can't do this without. It's horrible. This is a horrible position. So anyway, what we have is black keeping the queens on with queen c6, hitting the knight. The knight's protected. Now f6, f4, rook here, queen f3, and this looks impressive for white already. It seems as though this is great already structurally and in other respects, that this bishop is much better than this bishop, it seems. We have rook e7, a4, which releases the rook from nannying a2. The knight's even securer. Knight f8. In fact, the knight comes now to d5. Potentially, it's coming into this d5. Queen e8, rook e1. So after this, actually both f5 and e5 are also dangerous. These are quite dangerous pawns. And here, and this is quite intriguing from an attacking player's perspective. I thought that, okay, which one do you play, f5 or e5? Mengs played f5. If e5, I think black can blockade, well, potentially blockade things with f5. That is a potentially useful blockade that can't be allowed. But this f5, you might have some caution over this because the e5 square has been compromised. But what are we playing now? And this is really powerful stuff, because you don't want black to get his hands on the e5 square, for example, with knight d7 to e5. You do not want a knight blockading your whole position on e5. So white to play here Guess what white plays in this position, which rolls things forward quite aggressively. It's a really nice move. So sometimes the reason for playing apparently dynamic moves is not to suffer blockades. In fact, the very reverse. You don't want your opponent to create a blockade, but you actually want to maximize the potential of your own pieces, as well as stop any potential blockades from the opponent. So there's a move here which does that. Yeah, okay. E5, because this gives white the E4 square. We're stretching out this diagonal. We're potentially targeting G7 soon. Now F takes was played. If rook takes, then knight E4 hits that rook. And if here, now there's a crushing move in this position. This wasn't played in the game. Rook takes E5 wasn't played. But here there's a bone crushing move in this position. In fact, white's play here. This is why this wasn't played. Can you see what white can play in this position? Yeah, there's bishop f6 here. Because, you know, if it takes, we're going to just win the queen. Yeah, there's bishop f6. Okay, so that's probably why black played. He's threatened with also e6, squishing him. So he plays f takes, but now we have knight e4, and there's threats like queen g3 and then knight f6. So we have knight h7, queen g3. Now the threat is f6, forking here and here. So we have the rook getting out of the way, but e5 is taken, threatening mate. It's all crashing through rather brutally. Queen f8. And here is a strange one, which I think we've seen in many Magnus Carlsen games in the past. You'd think he's going to carry on with his attack, but what he does first is seemingly a bit of nifty prophylaxis, which sets even more difficulties for his opponents. He actually just played king h2. And you might wonder why. Why not f6? Well, the engine's choice is f6. I mean, f6 is a good move in this particular position anyway. For example, like this. Maybe king h2 is not strictly necessary. This looks pretty crushing anyway. But king h2 was played, just keeping the torture going a bit. And black compromised himself anyway with the move b5. Weakness of the last move. Guess what white plays here? White play here. So black's immediately compromised himself after this king h2 fancy prophylaxis move. Yeah, I'm off the Diet Coke, by the way. Most of the time I'm just drinking ginger and lemongrass cordial, adding carbonated water to that, which I think fundamentally has less chemicals than Diet Pepsi. So, okay, so here, I don't think my Blitz chest has suffered. My rating's quite good on some of the sites at the moment. It hasn't done any damage to my chest, apparently. So, okay, so here, white play. What would you play here? f6 is tempting. So you mentioned f6. That's pretty crushing as well. This is a silly position to ask. Knight takes c5 was played because the queen's tied down to g7, and the knight's crushingly coming to e6 now. After rook d2, knight e6. This is actually end of game. Levon resigns. If he moves his queen, he gets mated. If he takes this, then this is horrible as well, because we've got rook f7 coming here. So queen e7, rook f7, end of game. Bang, end of game. Yeah, so that was it actually. Taking c5 en route is quite useful to get a knight to e6. That's crushing. So, another magnificent example of Magnus's pet system against the Berlin defense. So you don't have to use the main Berlin defense routes anymore. You can use Magnus's recipe, which is give up the bishop pair, play h3 early to stop any annoying pins, generally break through the dark squares in the position. Because another thing, when you double the pawns, you're also slightly isolating more black's e-pawn, and black's dark squares in general are a little bit more looser than they usually are. And so this is a vivid demonstration, breaking down all the dark squares to black's king here. Was there any other games I wanted to check out? Not particularly. There was a wealth of games. Just make sure about this. There's another one I didn't really. Wasn't as vivid as that. Oh, there's just Kramnik blundering terribly. Kramnik managed to blunder a rook in another game. It's probably not worth going over that. Okay, it's quite late now. Okay, so I hope you got something from that. Remember to like the video if you got anything from it. Okay, thanks for coming. Yeah, have a good week. So yeah, likes are really appreciated for this video. So that was longer than usual. So hope you enjoyed those games. Got something from them? Maybe? Okay. Alright, thanks very much. Comments or questions on YouTube?